Hello, everyone. Today is the 1st of June, 2021. Incredible. It's hard to believe where the past 5 months have gone. And we're almost halfway through the year. I'm Tomaz Mueller, Tomaz Mueller, London. I'm an Ayurvedic professional and healer, healthcare, working in the field of healthcare for the past 30 years. And I felt drawn today to just record this message. Not quite sure where it's going to go and where it's going to take us. However, what inspired me to do this recording are many, many things. Number one is I've had a conversation with one of my tantric tutors the other day, and I was sharing some of my experiences with him. And when I left the conversation, I felt triggered. I felt triggered by the fact that the way I perceived the conversation was perhaps some of the stuff that I'm doing, some of the stuff that I'm taking my clients through, my friends and those who know me very closely, maybe or is probably beyond what can be described as conventional. I've been trained in the field of Ayurveda, Ayurvedic medicine, and I believe throughout 3 decades of working in the field as a health professional, as a well-being artist, I've come to understand that as a health professional, I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to continue my own personal journey, to continue my own growth, and to clear anything that is in the way of being the best possible version I can be of myself. And I feel strongly I would be a hypocrite if I wouldn't continue my journey of personal growth, self-development, and we might call it my journey of awakening. Although this awakening in a way sounds very big. And throughout my journey, if I look back at my life, nothing has gone the conventional way, which means that I grew up in a family with 4 brothers, their families, 11 nephews and nieces all together in a small village in the southwest of Germany near the French border. As a young person, I always felt like many of us, and I know I'm not the only one. I'm just sort of sharing really from my own experience that, like many of us, I felt somehow I don't quite know yet. I don't quite know why am I here. And the question of belonging has been a big question in my life. And I remember one of the first things I said to my mom, I feel like I'm a cosmic accident. We have had, or my mother had, my parents had 4 children prior to my mom giving birth to me, 4 boys. And there was a real strong need, a real strong desire of my parents to give it another go, in a sense, to see if a baby girl could be born into this life. And somehow I knew, and like I said, I kept telling my mom, oh, I feel like I'm a cosmic accident. Well, she gets very upset about it when I say that. But at the same time, it's like, as a young boy, I felt I've been dropped here and not quite understanding what my role and what my path is. And I tried to fit in. I tried to fit in with the expectations that my parents have had. So that means I ended up in a government position initially, as a government official sitting in the office. And I realized very, very early on in my professional career that I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And so it happened that I stumbled across meditation, I stumbled across Ayurveda, the entire spectrum. I was exposed within a short period of time to the entire spectrum of Vedic sciences, from Vedic astrology to Vedic architecture. And I felt a strong urge, oh yes, this is what somehow my calling is. And not really knowing what I get myself into, and not even knowing what Ayurveda was at the time. And I remember a very, very close friend of mine, she introduced me to, actually my wife at the time, she introduced me to meditation. And she said one day, oh, there is this first Ayurveda clinic that will open up in the Black Forest, and I would like to go and visit the place. Would you like to join me? I said, yes, of course. So we got there. We arrived at this hotel, which has been transformed into a beautiful Ayurvedic Panchakarma or rejuvenative clinic. And as I walked into the door, this doctor, this Ayurvedic doctor, walked towards me, and he said, here is an application form. I said, application form for what? Well, for Ayurveda, we will train Ayurvedic therapists. It's a 5-week intensive course, and I thought you are here for that purpose. I said, no. This is a complete mistake. I don't know what Ayurveda is. And I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm not a naturopath like my ex-wife was or still is. So, cut a long story short, that rattled the cage. Oh my God, Ayurveda, this sounds exciting. And I ended up basically enrolling for this 5 weeks training program, getting the first introduction into what Ayurveda is, in particular Panchakarma, its rejuvenative therapies. So I trained as an Ayurvedic therapist. And at the end of the training, they offered me a job. They offered me a job at the clinic. And I said, wow, but I can't do this because of what would my parents think? And how would that work out? I've got a very secure job here in the government, and that would mean that I need to leave all the security behind. And I knew the moment I close that door, I can't go back. So I decided ad hoc, or I should say my higher self decided to quit my job at the post office. And I told my parents on a Friday night, I very vividly remember, on a Friday night that I will move out of the family home tomorrow, which was Saturday morning. And on Monday, I will start a new job as an Ayurvedic therapist in the Black Forest. And that was a big shock. And I'm saying this because we are talking 1988, 89. At that time, Ayurveda was very, very unknown. Hardly anybody has heard the term Ayurveda. I mean, it was like, are you what? What is it? Where does it come from? So it was at the time where people still associated Ayurveda and the Ayurvedic knowledge with belonging to a sect. And as a result of me deciding to quit my job, to move out of the family home, out of the village, and I must say, still today, all my brothers, their families, they pretty much live within 2-3 kilometers within the village. And some of them even live in the village. They haven't moved, it hasn't changed. So as a result of me taking the decision, I faced the fact, or I had to face the fact, that my entire family didn't want anything to do with me for about 1.5 years. So I had no contact with my family. And that was very hard, because I believe to say that I'm a very homely, very family-oriented person. And one of the biggest things that I really struggle with, and have always struggled with, is conflict. So I went through this inner turmoil for a very long time, thinking, oh my God, have I taken the right decision? Am I doing the right thing? But as I grew, this is London life for you, music outside, front of the street. As I grew into my role as an Ayurvedic therapist, and as I grew into my meditation practice, I understood more and more that it was the right thing, although it has never been easy. And I ended up living in an ashram for 10 years. So I was teaching, traveling the world, practicing Ayurveda, teaching Ayurvedic therapists, opening up Panchakarma clinics in many different countries worldwide, from Japan to Russia to the States to various places in Europe, and then of course Germany, also Australia. In a way, it was a very, very exciting time, those 10 years. But at some stage, I realized that I've outgrown the shoes. I've outgrown that kind of environment, because I found it, for me, it was very restrictive. I was being pretty much prescribed how I should teach Ayurveda, how I should convey the message of this ancient wisdom tradition to my students. And that has totally blocked my creative thinking. And at some stage, after 10 years, I left. I was teaching in Australia, in Melbourne, at a private college. I remember I was teaching children at the age of 5, 6 years the basic principles of Ayurveda, the introduction into Ayurvedic pulse diagnosis and pulse analysis. And it was very, very fulfilling. But in my heart, I always felt a sense of emptiness, because I felt I have done something wrong. I have disappointed my parents. Although at that time, we're talking 10 years later, pretty much my family has accepted what I did. They have tried to understand, but of course, they have never really understood until much, much later. And I remember an incident in Australia. Again, I was traveling to Central Australia, to Uluru, which is the heart of the country. In the middle of the desert, I spent 7 days in a tent and really connecting to nature. And I remember one of those incidences. I was lying down in the grass, if you could call it grass. Everything was very dry. And I looked up in the sky and I could see the Milky Way rising on one side. And as the night passed, as the time passed, I could see the Milky Way above my head moving. And that was such a sense of connectedness. And in one of those nights I went to bed. I had a friend of me. We spent the time in a tent. Hardly any electricity on the campground. They switch off the electricity later in the evening. I woke up with this really intense pain in my chest, in particular down one side of my body. And I felt, oh my God, this is how it feels when you get a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. It was difficult for me to gasp for air. So I had to get out of bed. It must have been 1 or 2 o'clock at the time. And I got out of the tent. And then my friend came and he noticed, and said, what's wrong? What's happening? I said, I don't know, but I can't breathe. And I feel this heaviness on my chest. And then all of a sudden, I felt connected to my father, who was miles away in Europe. And I knew something was wrong with him. So I got up, found a few coins, and walked towards a telephone booth, because at the time, as I said, we haven't had any internet. There was no cell phones. So I contacted my family, which was daytime in Germany. And my mother confirmed that my dad had a heart attack. That same moment where I connected with him in Australia. So that was the beginning of a very tough journey for my father. This was, I think it was in 1991. And my father passed away in June 1999. Interestingly, he was born in 1933. He died at the age of 66. He died at the age of 66 in 99. So the 3, 6, and 9. For those who listen, many of you will probably know the significance of that. I thought that's quite interesting or quite weird. Only looking back now, a few years ago, I thought, wow, 3, 6, 9. So throughout the journey of my father really struggling with his health, I had several incidences where I was traveling. I was in different parts of the world, and each time when something went wrong, prior to that, I could pick it up. I felt it, and I was connected. And I felt that strong longing to wanting to be accepted, wanting to be understood. It was only after his passing, years later, that I was able to communicate with him and understood that it's only now, at that time, after his passing, that he could see what I was doing and could sort of get a sense of the work as Ayurvedic practitioner. And trust me, for many, many years, each time there were many moments where I thought, this is too hard, I can't do it, I'm just going to give up, and I go back and do a normal job. Especially after one incident where I was teaching Ayurveda, I was teaching meditation and Ayurveda in the eastern part of Germany, in East Germany. I opened a meditation center there. I went, and one of the first articles that was published about me and my work was in one of the newspapers, in one of the local newspapers. And it read in the headlines something like witches, gurus, ghosts, teachers of Ayurveda, yoga and meditation. And a big picture of mine and a list of things that you can get when you practice or when you go down the path of Ayurveda, such as internal bleeding, sexual confusion, mental imbalances, mental diseases. So many times, even later, I thought, I just give up. But each time I attempted to go back and try to take a conventional job, which ended up at some stage even just picking apples on an orchard in Australia, going and working on a kiwi fruit farm in New Zealand, stocking shelves in a supermarket, working as a children's entertainer, practicing magic and bringing joy to children through my magic shows. I did a degree after that in performing arts, acting and dance as a major. And I thought, yes, probably this is a better job. But each time again, I felt, okay, I'm going to step out of this profession that hasn't been recognized for so many years, and I will do something which is a bit more mainstream. Although acting, dancing isn't quite mainstream, is it? And I was being offered a position in a Pacific dance group, in a Pacific dance company. So here I am, this German white guy with his reddish, pinkish skin, dancing on stage amongst Maori Pacific group of people. And I thought, oh dear, again, I feel like totally out of place here. But it really gave me so much joy and pleasure. I did it. But throughout this time, I never lost contact with my Ayurveda, with consciousness, with expanding of my consciousness, with diving deeper into understanding the nature of life, questioning why is the world the way it is? Why am I here? And what am I doing here? So that never left me. And at some stage, I just had to accept Ayurveda is my path. Exploration of consciousness is my path. And that's what I wish to share. That's my contribution to people who maybe seek some help. That's my way of perhaps helping them along and helping me along the journey. Having lived in an ashram for 10 years, having done all this training for years and years, I left the ashram. I had no qualifications at hand. They even struggled to give me a certificate that I have done all this training, and I spend a lot of money and a lot of time on those courses. So I was left with the situation, okay, I've left the ashram, I've moved to the other side of the world, and I don't really know where am I going from here. I have done my performing arts degree, but what is next? Constantly the question of what is next. So luckily, I overcame my ego and I went back to school. I did a formal qualification in Ayurvedic medicine, which was a 3-year full-time study going through anatomy, physiology, pathology, diagnosis, all the Ayurvedic concepts of medicine health and well-being. And I was teaching at the college of Wellpark College of Natural Therapies. And that's where I met my future husband. I realized through my training, through my performing arts training, that I lived a life that wasn't true to myself. I wouldn't say I lived a lie, because at the time I lived a life to the best of my ability, not even knowing what was really going on. So some of the challenges that I was facing during my drama training and education really has brought me back to the essence of who I am as a person. And I left my ex-wife, we got separated, and I came out as openly gay. And I remember standing on one of the cliffs near the coast in New Zealand in the middle of the night, and I was screaming, I was crying, I was really asking and angry with my father. Why do you let me go through all of that? So I probably would have never had the courage of committing suicide, but those thoughts for quite a few months, many times crossed my mind. I went through the divorce. I got together with my husband at the time, and each step I took, I felt more and more authentic. I felt more and more, this is me. And still, even during the relationship that followed, I was trying to please, I was trying to be the good boy, I was trying to do what is expected of me to do. And somehow, and I know that I'm not on my own, within the relationship, I lost myself, completely lost myself. And that has led me to the path of Tantra, exploring Tantra as a practice, especially also because during my time in the ashram, it was always about developing heart chakra, developing third eye, crown chakra, going up to my higher self. Anything below the heart was like, okay, we just ignore. I'm talking about my own identity, the core of who I am, my own center of power. Then the sexual energy totally suppressed, and thinking that being sexually active is actually counterproductive to your path of enlightenment. Oh dear, thinking about enlightenment. And it is only through Tantra, through my tantric work, that I've realized how much grief, how much sadness I was actually carrying. And Tantra is, for me, has been like opening Pandora's box and seeing all those aspects deep within myself that I've nicely, comfortably polished, pushed under the carpet and just ignored, like get the vacuum cleaner, clean the carpet, but don't look under the carpet. So through the tantric work, I had to face some of my deepest fears, some of my deepest demons. And I remember the first 1 week training that I did. I spent about, I would say, half of the time in my bed crying my eyes out, where I felt this deep sadness coming up and clearing the energies and just getting a sense of being respected, being loved and being cared for in that community, it was so healing. And through the path of Tantra, I was introduced to plant medicine. Again, like many times in my life, I feel like, oh, this feels right. I don't know quite what it is, but it feels right. And I want to explore more. And here we are. A few years ago, it will be about 5 years ago, no, 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, on one day, and at that time I already moved back to London, back to Europe, moved to London and started have been running an Ayurvedic center, Ayurvedic practice here in London, seeing patients. So I remember, and the patients that have come across my work and felt drawn to my work, many of them were what would be described quite influential people within the society. A lot of them actually, sorry, I just had something coming up on the screen that I had to get rid of. Many of them, they lived quite a luxurious life. So on one day, on a Friday, I found myself in the middle of a royal wedding, and next minute, less than 24 hours later, in the jungle of Peru. No hot water, compost toilets, no electricity, no cell phone connection in my little tambo, in my little hut. And this is me. I've never taken any recreational drugs, so I've never smoked. But I knew, or I sensed, the power of what plant medicine can do. So I went through my first jungle journey, and by now I have been back several times. 2020 hasn't allowed for that to happen. So I decided, if I can't go to the jungle, I will bring the jungle to my little flat here in central London. So it was in one of the meditations that I heard what probably I would describe the spirit of Rose calling me, asking me to explore the energetics of white rose. And I remember my first thought was, where do I get white rose from? And I can't just go to Regent's Park and dig out the roots, the branches, and the flowers, the leaves of a white rose bush, go into my kitchen and brew up a decoction and then go through what is called in shamanic practices a rose diet or dieta. So I let that go. And so it happened, I was traveling to Switzerland, and one of my friends and patients, she said, I've got a white rose bush in the garden and we are trying to reorganize our garden and I have to take this rose bush out. And I said, oh, can I have the roots? Can I have some of the roots, the branches? She said, yes, of course. So that's how I did my first diet here in London, sitting with the energetics of white rose. For about 4 days, I said to my family and friends, I will be offline, so you can't reach me on any on phone, or even I wouldn't check my emails. So I sat in meditation and I connected to the energy of the rose. And from rose, I ended up doing a blackout retreat a few months later with oak that has come to me through my dear friend Edina from Hungary, from a valley that apparently is a volcanic valley and known for its sacred energy. So I blacked out my entire flat here in London, and for 5 days I sat in total darkness. I went to the extent to even blacken out my fridge, blacken out the kettle, so there was no artificial light source. I didn't even listen to any sound frequencies. So I was just sitting there and going through the process of observing the fears that came up at the time in the darkness, the fears of being in the dark, which led me to some of the traumatic events that occurred at the beginning time of my Ayurvedic journey, when I first started meditating, and I ended up being beaten up, and intuitively at that time I felt the power of the mantra. I felt how I can use my meditation technique even in these challenging situations. So all of that bubbled to a surface. I mean, there's much more to tell, but I just wanted to share a glimpse of my own personal journey. And the reason why I feel to do this recording is because of what got triggered having had a conversation with my tantric teacher a couple of days ago. Basically, what came up for me was, you can't take people through shamanic journeys. You can't share plant medicine to the ability that I felt or I feel intuitively is the right thing for me to do, where I feel confident based on my own experience that I can hold the space for the very few that have chosen to dive into the world of trauma, shadows, facing our fears, facing restrictions and looking at these restrictions and breaking through the chains of these restrictions through the use of plant medicine, in particular through the use of mapacho. And yesterday, a very, very dear friend of mine who has become a beautiful friend, which I consider as one of the many gifts that 2020 has brought to me, allowed me to go with him through that journey. And incredible to see what has come up for him and how deep the process was for both of us. So, and then the conflict in my brain. So you shouldn't be doing this because officially you haven't graduated from shamanic school. So you shouldn't really be doing this. And then on the other side, well, I did it. I did it because it felt right. I did it because I can see that it is of benefit. And I've gone through the journey. I've gone through my own experience. And what I'm doing is I'm sharing my experience. Somehow I have been guided to share some of my experiences and knowledge, which is definitely not conventional Ayurveda. And I shouldn't feel wrong about it. And I shouldn't feel inadequate because I haven't graduated shamanic school. So this conversation, this dialogue has been going on for a few days after that interview. And I guess the essence of why I feel drawn to do this video today is times have changed, frequencies have changed, our energy field has changed, our physiology has changed. And when I talk about the 3D physical body, I mean our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic body, which is still part of the 3D construct of us going through our own individual journeys here on this planet Earth, especially after the 26th of May last week. Like many of us have experienced this massive shift in energy, and everything that we currently face is part of a process to recognizing truth. Truth is a big word. What is truth? In actual fact, we can't put truth in a box, because what is true for me might not be true for you. What is true for you might not be true for me. And what I come to share with you today is to really encourage you to step into your own power, to step into your own being as a sovereign being. And I remember one of the sentences that Maharishi always used to say, and I come from the Vedic tradition, from Maharishi's teachings, was knowledge is structured in consciousness, and knowledge is different in different states of consciousness. At the time, I didn't really understand what it means, but more so now than ever, I come to understand that everything we have access to within ourselves. And I've got so many books that I've started reading in the last year. I read a few lines, a few pages. I feel like, oh yes, I need to read this book because this makes me wiser, or this adds to my toolkit as a health professional, as somebody who can guide people through their own journeys. So maybe this is a new tool. And then I don't really feel like completing reading the book. But I've been sitting a lot in deep meditation. I've been going through extended periods of water fasting to clear my physical self and to access the higher aspect of my being, my soul self, or my higher self, whatever you want to call it, deep within myself, by going through the energy of the heart, by connecting to the light within me, because we are all beings and fragments of the same light. And as soon as we tap into that light, we are complete. We know everything. Everything that we wish to acquire, all knowledge that we wish to explore, we can explore by diving deep within, by stepping into our truth, by sitting in silence, by sitting in meditation. And I listened to a video yesterday by Alan Watts, and he was talking about ego. And it's quite interesting. One thing that's sort of stuck with me is that he said something along those lines, that wherever there is noise, The truth, your higher self, is silent. Wherever there is silence, your truth comes forth. This is all in the context of ego, and that actually ego doesn't exist. So no more are we dependent on knowledge that is given to us, taught to us through the books, through media, through education. Everything is accessible from the depth of our own being. I'm not saying we should not be exposing ourselves to educational left brain training. I'm just saying that filter that knowledge through your own self. See what resonates with you. Question the truth. Question the truth for you at this particular moment in time. And at the same time, don't be afraid to look into Pandora's box. If you're coming from an honest place, if you're coming from a place of true wanting to grow and truly wanting to expand your awareness, you will get the help that is required to hold your hands through perhaps some dark aspects of your being, so you can come out the other end feeling lighter, feeling a tiny bit closer to your true, authentic self. And also what I have been facing, especially in 2020, is, like all of us, like many of us, I should say, a sense of feeling totally alone, feeling in a way, it's like feeling misunderstood and feeling ridiculed. And it's not just in the last year, but it has really percolated more and more to the surface. And the moment I sat with that feeling, I sat with it and I felt into that sadness, into that deep feeling of loneliness, and shed some tears and frustration. And it went from sadness to anger to compassion to myself, to total contentment, peace within myself. So the moment I accepted it, people have appeared in my life. A new family has come together, and a family that understands my language. And it's also true for you. It's also true for anybody who may be questioning at this point in time, what is the purpose? What is really, what is really going on? Where am I? What am I supposed to do? Go into that questioning with a sense of curiosity. Go in there like a little child. Explore, where does it come from? What does truth mean for me today? Where do I want to be tomorrow? You may not have an answer. It may be, I don't know. But sit in that process of I don't know. And from that place of I don't know, knowingness will rise for sure, like the sun rises in the east, wherever you are on this planet. What fascinates me is that each time we feel that we have conquered, yes, I got rid of that trauma, I got rid of that belief system or that pattern, yet there's another layer to discover. And the true meaning is really, it's not so much important about the goal, it's about the path. The path is more important than the goal, the destination. And the higher we go, the higher we climb on the mountain of self-discovery, the narrower the path is going to get. The less air we have to breathe, the more rocky it becomes, but the more rewarding the experience are going to be. So, in summary, if you feel drawn to something, if you feel drawn to do something, it doesn't matter what anybody else around you thinks of your plans, ideas, visions. If you feel right in yourself, and I'm not talking about the ego self, I'm talking about the higher self. If it comes from a place of higher self, it comes from a place of truth, from your truth. And never allow anybody to speak your truth, to walk your truth, to breathe your truth. We are sovereign beings, and the time is there for us to decide which way do I choose to go? Do I choose to go the path of security, what is called security, material security very often, or do I choose the path of liberation? And that requires to jump only to get to know. In the jumping, we realize we can fly.